This is Meet the Press with Tim Russert.
Our issues this Sunday: a federal judge says Microsoft is a monopoly. Now what? And with Congress about to leave town, the Republicans and the White House battle over HMOs, minimum wage, gun control, and more. Will anything get done? Those issues and more for our guest, the White House Chief of Staff, John Podesta. Then, educating our nation's children. We'll debate school vouchers, academic standards, tenure for teachers, and more. With former Education Secretary William Bennett, who has written a new book, The Educated Child. And the President of the American Federation of Teachers Union, Sandra Feldman. And George W. Bush flubs a foreign policy quiz.
Prime Minister of India?
The new Prime Minister of India is, no.
Was this a fair interview or an ambush? And the Vice President and his controversial campaign advisor, Naomi Wolf, spark a debate over his alpha maleness and her role in the campaign.
Harry, this is a real gender moment where I feel like you're not hearing me.
Insights and analysis from presidential historian Doris Kearns Goodwin, David Meredith of the Washington Post, and William Safire of the New York Times. In our Meet the Press Minute, 20 years ago this very week, our embassy in Tehran was stormed and American citizens were taken hostage. 1 month later, Iran's foreign minister appeared on Meet the Press and gave the first authoritative word on their condition in captivity.
Believe me, Mr. Monroe, they're fine, and they're in good health, and they are comfortable.
But first, the White House Chief of Staff, John Podesta, welcome.
Tim?
A federal judge says that Microsoft is a monopoly. Is the president pleased?
Well, Tim, this is a case that's an antitrust action the Justice Department is pursuing. I think it's not a policy question, but I think it does show that the antitrust laws, which have been on the books to protect consumers and protect innovation for the last 100 years, are just as relevant today as they were in the 1890s when we lived in an era of Standard Oil and the other big trusts. So I think we'll pursue this case in federal court, and the Justice Department, I think, has done a good job on it. We'll just see what happens at the end of the day.
The president does support the Justice Department.
Well, of course he supports the Justice Department, but it's a enforcement action, so it's not appropriate for us to get involved at the White House.
He said the other day that, quote, a lot of businessmen have told him they agree with this Microsoft action.
Well, I think that again, that the judge's ruling was out there for all to see, and I think that they will take appropriate steps as we move forward. But given the fact that this is an enforcement action in federal court, I don't think it's really appropriate for me to get into the details of the case. I'll leave that to the Justice Department lawyers.
We're in the final stages of negotiations between Congress and the White House. Right. Will there be a government shutdown, or will you resolve your differences?
Well, I don't think there'll be a government shutdown. The president certainly doesn't want one, and he said that he will keep extending these so-called continuing resolutions a week at a time, if that's what it takes, until we can resolve our differences. So I think we don't want a government shutdown. They don't want a government shutdown. I don't see that in the cards. But we have very major issues to resolve, whether we're going to put more teachers in the classroom to reduce class size and improve performance in the lowest grades, whether we're going to put more cops on the street to continue the decline in the crime rate, whether we're going to pay our debt to the UN. So they're big issues. We're meeting today. Our negotiators, led by Jack Lew, the budget director, will be meeting with the Senate appropriators to tackle the tough issue of the Interior bill, which has all these anti-environmental riders which need to be stripped off, and we need some more money for the key environmental programs and land acquisition. So hopefully we can resolve that in the next day or so and move on to the other remaining issues.
Realistically, will you get more teachers and smaller classes this year?
Realistically, I think we are not prepared to go home until we do get more teachers and lower class size. The Republican leadership made a commitment to that last year after the president pressed, and they did finally made a commitment to it. We've hired 30,000 new teachers. There's a report out that the program is quite successful, and we're going to keep pressing them to fulfill the commitment they not only made to the president but to the American people that this program to put teachers in the classroom will be funded adequately, and there won't be any gimmicks to take the money out the back door as we have now currently in the current bills.
Bottom line, no budget deal unless you get that.
That's correct.
HMO reform, the right of patients to sue their HMO.
That appears to be dead this year.
Well, we were very displeased with what the Speaker did this week. As you know, Tim, he appointed, after an overwhelming vote in the House of Representatives, to give a real Patients' Bill of Rights, one that was enforceable, that provided the rights that people need in HMOs, with 75 Republicans voting for that bill, with an overwhelming bipartisan support for the bill. The Speaker appointed conferees to settle their differences with the Senate, and who did he appoint? 12 of the 13 Republicans he appointed to the committee voted against the bill. So I think the fix is in. The special interests still have a hammerlock on this process. I think they're trying to put it in a closet, not let it come out. But I don't think the American people are going to stand for that.
But for this year, it's dead.
I think for this year, it doesn't look. It certainly doesn't look promising. I don't think we're going to get it. But maybe there's some bright good news in that, which is maybe now the members of Congress will get out of town, get out of the grip of the special interests, go back home and listen to their constituents, and maybe when they come back next year, they'll understand that this is the #1 issue, not just amongst Democrats, but amongst independents and amongst Republicans, and they'll finally take action on a real enforceable Patients' Bill of Rights.
Increase in the minimum wage, the Republicans are saying you can have that if you give us some tax cuts. Will there be a trade-off?
I think that is really an amazing thing today. What they've tried to load onto a $1 an hour minimum wage is a tax cut that would give a $6,000 a year tax cut to people making over $300,000 a year. This is another one of those issues which I don't understand how they really can go home and look at a working mom in the eye who's making $5.15 an hour and want to deny her or hold hostage a $1 an hour increase in the minimum wage because they have to attach a $6,000 tax cut for people making over $300,000.
But will you make a deal in order to get a minimum wage increase?
I think we will press and press to get that $1 an hour minimum wage, and we want to see it done in a way that's clean. But we'll just have to see this thing go as it goes along. The bill they put down on the table, we would not support. We would veto.
Gun control, is that dead this year?
Gun control, again, sometimes I think I wonder whether the Republican leadership rolls out of bed in the morning and thinks, what can we stop? Can we stop gun control? Can we stop the Patients' Bill of Rights? Can we stop the minimum wage? On gun control, this bill passed the Senate overwhelmingly with closing the gun shop loophole, the trigger lock bill, etc. That passed in right after the Columbine shootings last late spring. And now we're still making no progress on it. And again, I think this is one of those issues that maybe a winter break for this Congress would be useful, in that they can go home and listen to their constituents. Maybe they should have some town meetings and hear what the people are saying.
The Republicans will come back, however, and say, all we wanted to do was reduce spending by 1%. 1%, a penny on a dollar. And the Clinton administration said, no, we can't possibly find that. This week, a GAO study found $20 billion of waste in just 4 programs. Why can't you find a penny in every dollar of waste?
What they've done is not tried to target it to waste or try to find programs that don't work and eliminate them. What the Republican Congress did was to put an across-the-board cut on all federal spending, which will have a real impact. Rather than going after the pork they added or the waste that's in programs and do targeted cuts and targeted offsets, what they said was they threw up their hands. They couldn't fill the hole they had created for themselves by spending the Social Security surplus, and said, let's just cut 1% across the board. That doesn't sound like very much, maybe. But what it means is 71,000 women, infants, and children who don't get nutrition supplements through the WIC program. It means 5,700 kids who don't get a summer job under the Disadvantaged Summer Job Program. It means 250 FBI agents that let go. It means 48,000 active duty men and women in the military who have to be let go rather than getting rid of boats that the Pentagon didn't ask for and planes they didn't want.
One of the issues the Republicans raised this week was the whole idea of debt forgiveness. The administration suggesting we can spend $320 million in taxpayer money by forgiving the debts of the so-called third world countries. Senator Jesse Helms took to the floor of the Senate. This is what he had to say on this issue. I remind senators that every one of the governments whose debt the president proposes to forgive has no one to blame but themselves for pursuing socialistic status policies and often outright theft. that drove them in a hole in the first place. He went on, make no mistake about it, this proposal diverts assistance from Hurricane Floyd victims to corrupt, economically and politically repressed foreign countries, many of whom are not even friendly to the United States. What do you say to the taxpayers of America today that you want to, in effect, spend $320 million of taxpayer money on forgiving debt of other countries that we gave money to, or loaned money to, instead of using that money for American citizens?
These are the poorest countries in the world, and what this program does in conjunction with the multilateral lending institutions and other countries providing their own bilateral assistance is to support not the dictators that Mr. Helms is talking about, but governments that are reforming their economies, trying to get out of the debt that was loaded on over the course of the past decades. These are the poorest of the poor people of the world, and rather than farmers raising a crop, trying to feed their families to provide payments to debt to these international institutions, it may make some sense to try to build those economies, let democracy take root, let economic reform take root, make those economies that will be markets for U.S. products, and begin to build a fair and just society in the poorest countries in the world.
Patent law. There is now a bill racing through Congress which would change the way patents are granted. 26 Nobel Peace winners, scientists, business people, small inventors are saying that you're trying to fix the process. You're trying to really punish small inventors by having to reveal their plans before they are granted a patent. Why is the administration pushing this quickly so hard?
Well, I think that we've been working on this for a long time to try to spur innovation and to try to make our patent laws consistent with the patent laws overseas. There has been some debate about it. I think that there's bipartisan support for it in Congress. I think that it ought to be fully debated, and the views of the people you just mentioned ought to be fully heard by Congress before a final bill is enacted. We're not trying to railroad a bill through Congress, but we think that these reforms are modest, make our patent laws consistent with those overseas, and will actually spur innovation so that we have the kind of new drugs, new products, the kind of innovation that this Microsoft suit really is all about that we talked about at the beginning, out and available to consumers.
Egypt Air Flight 990. Is there still any indication whatsoever of potential terrorism?
I think you know what the NTSB has said, and I have nothing to add to it. I don't think we have any indication of that. We're still engaged in the salvage rescue, and we're going to recover the black boxes, and if there's more to say, they'll have something to say about it.
As you know, another issue surfaced this week, and that is victims of terrorist act who sued the terrorist nation or the sponsor of terrorism in order to get money back for the loss of their loved ones. Right. In 1996, the president forcefully came out and supported such legislation. This is how USA Today reported it just this week. It says, Clinton flip-flop angers terrorism victims' kin. President blocks compensation he called for in 96. In 96, President Clinton called on Congress to pass legislation giving victims' families access to the frozen assets of terrorist governments. Congress did just that. But when two sets of victims went to court and won compensation, the Clinton administration blocked the families from receiving the awards. Why?
Well, this is a difficult issue, Tim. I think it affects our assets and the livelihood of people, our own citizens overseas. We're trying to work with Congress to find a resolution of this, but I think that it implicates the foreign policy interests of the U.S. in terms of suits against the United States overseas. The Treasury Department is trying to work with Congress to find a settlement that would make sense in this context, and hopefully we can find a resolution that would take account of all the people who have claims against those frozen assets of, for example, the Cuban government. So I think we would like to find a resolution of that. Mr. Eisenstadt, the Deputy Treasury Secretary, is working with the Hill to see if we can find a compromise on that issue.
But in 1996, when this was proposed, let me show you exactly what the president said. He was emphatic in support of it. Here he is.
I'm asking that Congress pass legislation that will provide immediate compensation to the families, something to which they are entitled under international law, out of Cuba's blocked assets here in the United States. If Congress passes this legislation, we can provide the compensation immediately.
And the father of one of the victims who was hurt in a bombing in Israel, who sued the Iranian government, wrote a piece in the day's Washington Post saying the president personally told him he supported him in this quest. Why did the president flip flipped so dramatically on this issue?
Well, I think that again, I think we'd like to find a resolution to this and see if we can find a bill that works, that doesn't harm our interest overseas in terms of assets of U.S.'s assets in foreign countries that would be subject to suits like these. We have great sympathy for the victims of these crimes, and I think working together with the Republicans and Democrats in Congress, we can find a resolution to this.
Will the United States build a missile defense system without the approval of Russia or a change in the ABM, Anti-Ballistic Missile Treaty?
Well, we're working with the Russians to try to deal with the joint threat that we have from rogue states who have developed missiles, and we think there are that technological advances since the ABM Treaty was written in 1972 do provide some threat, and that a national missile defense system, which we have not decided to deploy, but a decision on that will be coming in the next summer, is something that may be in the national interest. But I think rather than saying that what we will or won't do, what we ought to do now is try to work with the Russians cooperatively to see if we can make some modest modifications to the ABM Treaty to permit us to deal with these threats, which are threats to Russia as well as threats to the United States, and we're hopeful to be able to do that. There is obviously a supreme national interest clause in the ABM Treaty, so that if we make a judgment that we have to go that way, we can do so, but that's not our preference, obviously, is to leave the framework of the ABM Treaty in place, make the modifications that would be necessary, and really protect both countries and protect the whole world in doing so.
But as we decide that we need a missile defense system, we would not let the Russians veto that decision.
I don't think we would ever let if we decided it was in our national interest, we would never let the Russians veto a decision of that magnitude.
John Podesta, White House Chief of Staff, thank you for joining us on this Sunday morning.
Thanks, Tim.
Coming next, how can we improve education in America's classrooms? Author William Bennett and Sandra Feldman, head of the President American Federation of Teachers Unions, square off. Then we'll talk alpha males, pop quizzes, presidential temperament, and more with David Marinus of the Washington Post, William Safire of the New York Times, presidential historian Doris Kearns Goodwin. All coming up right here on Meet the Press.
Meet the Press is sponsored by GE. Visit us online at www.ge.com. GE, we bring good things to life.
Question. If you can have someone plan, design, build, operate, manage, and maintain your communications network around the clock, around the world, wouldn't you? Presenting Lucent Technologies NetCare. If you haven't thought about a better way to manage your network, it's time. Lucent Technologies. We make the things that make communications work.
Where's the center of the tech world?
Tokyo?
I don't think so.
Yeah, center is best described by use of the Fourier vortex theory.
Let me get back to you. Whoa! Not here! Tech world? Anyone?
Looking for the center of the tech world?
I think I found it.
Maybe it's where the most highly respected, highly successful tech companies are found. The New York Stock Exchange.
Think the Fed's gonna raise interest rates?
Your website's going to be set up like an MMDS gigabyte with a rotating geostationary satellite. We feel that both you and your customer will appreciate binary riddles that users love. You know, that's part of the fun. Then wait till you guys see this. The technology will be obsolete by the time we leave here today, but that's okay because we'll come back.
Who designs your website is up to you. Hooking it up and delivering the goods, leave that up to us.
Of course you ship everything FedEx.
FedEx, be absolutely sure.
The 290 horsepower Lexus LS 400. When you gotta go, you gotta go.
240 hours restoring an old baseball field in East Cleveland. 300 hours reading with first graders in a school near Albany. 12,000 hours teaching science in Louisville, 2,000 hours mentoring high school seniors in Cincinnati. This year, GE volunteers across the country will spend over 1 million hours helping others because they know the best way to change things is to reach out a hand.
We're back. Welcome both. Here's the front page yesterday of the New York Times. Most 8th graders in New York City fail state test. Fears on promotions, questions raised on quality curriculum statewide. It says that 77% of the 8th graders flunked math, 65% flunked English. This is a disaster about our public schools. Sandra
Well,
Feldman?
it isn't really a disaster because if we stay the course, it won't be a disaster because what you have there is a test that is testing a much higher standard than we've tested in the past 2 decades. And it isn't surprising that the kids didn't do well. And by the way, you know, private school kids who were submitted to it didn't do any better than the public school kids because we're asking them to know a lot more than we have asked them before, and curriculum has not caught up yet with the test, which is a problem. But you've now got a standard out there, you've got a benchmark out there, and if we stay the course, the kids will do better. They'll do better next year and the year after, and ultimately, we will have children learning at a higher standard. So I think we have to understand what that test means.
Mr. Bennett?
Well, I'd be closer to saying it is a disaster, and I'd be also want to say we shouldn't stay the course, but change the course. There are some good things going on. There are some very positive developments going on in education. We do see some progress in some areas, but in test after test across this country, particularly when we test our kids against kids from other industrialized nations, the results are very distressing. The third international assessment of math and science, I think, is the most telling. It shows our kids in the 4th grade doing pretty well, up in the top third, top quarter. In the 8th grade, they're in the middle. In the 12th grade, they're toward the bottom. The longer you stay in school in America, the dumber you get relative to kids in other nations, and that's not good. Where it's really a catastrophe is in the places where the kids need the education the most. Now, there's some common ground, I think, on at least in some places, for raising standards, and standards we have to raise. But when we have a situation where 1/5 of our kids can test at the proficient level in math, 1/4 can test proficiently in writing, and 1/3 in reading, that's reading, writing, and arithmetic. We don't have a majority testing at the proficient level in the 4th grade in any of those 3 basic subjects. We got to do better than that.
Well, you know, we have been doing better, and I think that it's unfair to keep assuming that we're in the kind of condition that we were in the 70s and 80s. I mean, we're in a very different state now because we've been making progress. The test scores are up. SAT math scores are higher than they've been in 2 decades. Kids are graduating, excuse me, I didn't interrupt you. Kids are graduating, who are graduating, 2/3 of them are going on to college. 4th graders in our poorest schools and districts, and I'm very, very familiar with those schools. I spent my life in them, gained a year last year in reading and math. We are making progress, and you know, having a constant doom and gloom about what's happening is not helpful. Pressing for higher standards and for the intervention and the support and the help that the kids and the teachers need to meet those standards is what we ought to be doing, and that's what most states, most governors are doing, most teachers and parents are doing. And I think we're going to be seeing we are seeing real improvement in our schools.
I wouldn't deny the improvement, but again, it's from a level that is so low. You're right, there's been improvement since the 70s and 80s. No one would deny that, particularly in the math scores. But the math scores in the late 90s, and we are now, you know, with the computer, the PC, the information superhighway, are not where they were in the late 60s. So it's from a base that is so low, you're bound to make improvement. I'm all for celebrating what's good, and I do a lot of that in this book, and I'm all for praising when the teachers' unions or anybody else does something right. But anybody who thinks we don't have an educational problem in this country in terms of educational achievement, particularly for the kids from whom it matters the most, is whistling in the
Well,
wind.
we absolutely do have a problem. There's no question about it. Kids who are in our poorest neighborhoods their schools have been neglected, their education's been neglected, and we absolutely have to do something about that. But overall, the American schools are doing a job for most of our kids. Look, we have the strongest economy in the world. We are leading in technology in the world. It isn't happening, you know, magically, ephemerally, without the kids who are working in Silicon Valley, these youngsters who are working for, you know, on these computers. So I think it's just wrong not to acknowledge that our school system is making progress, that it can that it is going further. Yes, we have problems, and what we ought to do is we ought to lower class sizes for the kids in the poorest school districts. We ought to train the teachers better. We ought to fix the buildings so that kids are not going to school in dilapidated, miserable circumstances. That's what we ought to be doing.
Sure there's progress. But you talk about Silicon Valley, that's a great example. I was in Silicon Valley, I was having breakfast there last month. They were complaining about the fact that they couldn't get enough good math and science teachers into the classroom. Why? Because, of course, the teachers' union will not let in people who know math and science unless they're members of the union.
Absolutely
the situation
not true.
in math and science happily works in America because of immigration. There is still a shortage of 350,000 people for high-tech jobs, and you know that's the case, because we do not teach enough math and science in our lower grades.
Absolutely right.
I am prepared to concede progress, but I'll tell you, if you sit and you look at the American educational system, you look at the investment, you see the inefficiencies brought about mainly by the fact that we have an educational monopoly. I salute the American Federation of Teachers for its stand on standards. They've been right on this a long time. But its insistence that it remain as a monopoly and not allow the kind of competition which would improve this system and allow some of these kids who are in these horrible schools freedom to leave. Arthur Levine, the president of Columbia Teachers College, a lifelong Democrat and liberal, said, you know, we have to have a rescue operation for some of our children. They just need to be let go, to be freed out of these horrible, absolutely horrible schools. And anybody who, I've spent a fair amount of time in the schools too, Ms. Feldman, you can go to these classrooms and see that kids are not learning anything. They're then given a visa out through the student sponsor program, or thank God for Ted Forsman and John Walton. They go into some other schools, little, small, run-down Catholic schools, and these kids do a wonderful job.
Look, you have to make a choice between doing what works for all the kids, which, providing a voucher for a few kids does not do, or fixing the schools and making them work for all of the kids. And we know it works. We can make schools work. In some of the toughest neighborhoods across the country, in city after city, we have schools that are working when you put certain things into place. You give kids early childhood education, you lower class sizes, you provide better training for the teachers, you focus on methodologies that work, and we know what they are. And that's what we ought to be doing, not just thinking that we're going to develop an escape hatch for some kids. I want to say something about math and science teaching, because it's absolutely ridiculous to say that the teachers union doesn't want math and science teachers coming into the schools. We have a shortage of math and science teachers. There's a shortage of engineers because we're not letting the marketplace work when it comes to teacher salaries. If we paid more, you could attract math and science teachers into the school system, and you have a problem in math and science because you have people teaching out of field.
You could attract math and science expertise. Would you say on the air today that you will welcome people who know math and science,
absolutely.
Even if they won't join your union?
Oh, look, they don't have to join the union. Our union is a voluntary organization, and we support alternative. We support. Oh, please.
Now let me.
Please, that's ridiculous.
Let me stay with.
We've never had a requirement that they have to join the union.
Let me stay with the issue that Mr. Benner raised of monopoly, the whole idea of competition, of school choice, of vouchers. A fellow named Matthew Miller wrote an article for the Atlantic Monthly. He used to work for the Clinton administration. And he said, why don't we raise expenditures for schools in the inner cities by 20%, increase funding by 20%. As a trade-off for that, we would give students a voucher to go to a non-public school if they so choose. So the public schools would get more funding, but parents would then have a choice as to where they send their kid. And the competition would be great for the public schools, great for teachers, great for parents, and great for kids. Would you accept something like that?
Well, I think that he wrote a very thoughtful article. He made a proposal which I think is very well-meaning. Pragmatically, I don't see how it would work. I think if there were a willingness to put 20% or more into the education of poor children, that money would be best spent lowering class sizes, providing better teacher training, putting proven programs into place, wiring the schools and making sure that the kids can have access to computers and the newest technology. And I think that it is not in the interest of kids to have, a radical experiment, although I appreciate the effort that he made and the thinking that he did, and I think that it's a well-meaning and interesting piece of work, but I'm very pragmatic about this. I know that we can get kids learning, and I want to do the things that will make that happen.
So you oppose any kind of voucher, period?
Well, I'm opposed to vouchers as public policy. I think that we ought to have choice within the public school system. I've always supported that. I've participated in the development of a lot of schools of choice in New York City. But I don't think that taking money, public money, out of schools that have great needs, and there's just no question that when you're talking about inner city urban schools, they have great needs. They have huge class sizes. They have a lot of teachers who are working without appropriate certification, education, and qualifications. They have dilapidated buildings. I think you ought to put the money into the kids who are there, all of the kids.
Let me just comment on this, because this Matthew Miller article really nailed it, and really nailed the teachers' unions for the hypocrisy which they practice. They say they need more money. So Miller proposes 20% increase, but you let people choose where they want to go to school. At the end of the article, he interviews Bob Chase, who's the head of the National Education Association, the other big teachers union. Chase says no deal, just like Ms. Feldman said no deal. Miller says, how about we double your budgets, but give choice? No deal. Triple your budgets, but make choice? No deal. It's not about money. It's about keeping their monopoly, and that's what that Miller article makes it. Let me finish my point, because I didn't interrupt you. If you want to do the real acid test on this thing, you take a look at public school teachers in the big cities and find and discover when you do the research that they are more likely to send their children to a private school than people who make the same amount of money. Public school teachers, hold income constant, are more likely to send their kids to private schools than other people. The people who know the system best often take the job in the public school system so they can have a way out for their children. Now, let's just be consistent on this one. If you're going to take the opportunity to give your school, your child the best education, why not give other parents the same opportunity? Arthur Levine said it right. This is a rescue operation, and the corruption of the union on this point is there's no legal argument left. There's no constitutional argument left. There's no moral argument left. All that's left is the power of the teachers' unions, and you're losing that argument, Ms. Feldman, and people are seeing it.
You have a bias against teachers' unions. I represent teachers. That's who I represent. The teachers are in these schools working under terribly adverse conditions, trying to do the best that they can for the kids, and that's what we want. I think that almost all the teachers, of course, there are always some, but the fact of the matter is that we've got teachers who are working their hearts out into very difficult conditions, and they ought to be supported, not attacked. And what we do is we represent teachers. We have no other interest except to give them voice and to try to get the best for them to be able to do the job that they want to do with children.
That's great.
And, you know, it is just not true. It is absolutely not true that teachers send that most teachers send their kids to private school. It's absolutely not true.
I didn't say that. I said if you hold income constant, you take a family with $70,000, if they're public school teachers in the big cities, they are more likely to send their kids to private school than another couple making $70,000. That's how they exercise their choice. But to the poor people, the answer is too bad.
No,
you stay here. You stay in our
no one's saying that to poor people. What we're saying is let's fix the schools for all the children. Let's not just create an escape hatch for a few children. Let's do the things that need to be done. Let's spend the money. If you've got money, let's spend it on lowering class sizes. Let's spend it on improving teacher training. Let's spend it on giving the kids summer school and after-school programs and tutorial programs so that they can learn to these new standards. Let's keep the standards movement going.
I gave Ms. Feldman the first word. Mr. Ben, I'll give you the last word, then we have to go.
All right, look, how about doing both? How about reforming the system? I did this book, and this book, by the way, isn't about educational policy. It's about how to help parents if their kids get a good education. It's a pro-teacher book. And I am all for teachers, but I'll tell you the teachers' union is hurting the cause of teachers and hurting the reputation of teachers in this way. Mr. Forsman and Mr. Walton asked the poor people of this country that they want an opportunity to get out of the schools they were in. They expected about 50,000 people to apply. 1.25 million poor parents applied to get their children out of the schools they were in. Let's improve what we've got. Let's work within the system to improve it, but let's create some competition, and for God's sakes, in the worst circumstances, let's give these kids a way out into some place where they can get an education.
To be continued. Sandra Feldman, Bill Bennett, a debate that will go on for some time. Thank you very much for your views. Coming next, feminist author Naomi Wolf's newly discovered role as a Gore advisor. Plus, George W. Bush is put on the spot. Fair play or over-the-line questions. Our political roundtable with Sapphire, Goodwin, and Marinus. All coming up right here on Meet the Press.
They don't know me. I get these catalogs for kids' clothes, and I don't have kids.
I get discounts for car repair. I take the subway.
I get offers for aluminum siding. I live in an apartment.
Hey, you behind the glass. You the one with the computers and databases. You don't know me. You don't know them. Oh, right. You ought to know who we are.
Getting to know you, getting to know all about you.
Yeah, I think they got sandwiches in there.
We mend broken hearts. We make lives memorable. We help people love one another. We're the people of Pfizer. We develop medicines that make the world a better place. We spend over $2.5 billion a year on research. That's why we believe we'll introduce more new medicines for more diseases than anyone else. We're not just looking for cures, we're going to find them. Pfizer, life is our life's work.
Turning on the light, I was immediately aware of something different. It was the same room. She was the same woman. Yet somehow, incredibly, something had changed.
The Enrich bulb from GE. Its innovative glass filters out rays that dull colors. Blues look bluer, reds redder. Almost everything looks better.
Her blue eyes blazed. Her black hair burned. She turned to me. I turned to her and said,
That's some light bulb.
The incredible Enrich bulb, only from GE.
You're 345.6 miles from El Paso, Texas. Austin is north-northeast, turning south-southeast. Dry cleaner's 3.4 miles away. Buenos Aires. I am 45 feet above sea level, 47.
Should have bought you a tie.
You rely on Amazon.com for electronics and all sorts of gifts. They rely on priority mail to get it there fast and to save you money.
At this pace, we would get there in 12 days.
What's your priority?
Like an eagle.
Inside Campaign 2000 with William Sapphire, Doris Kearns-Goodwin, David Marinus after this very brief station break.
This week on Today, advice for women over 50, from career change to parenting. Plus, Tom Hanks, Susan Sarandon, and Bette Midler. This week on Today.
Monday, the home of the brave. How two Hollywood stars, Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, are making sure the men and women who saved the world aren't forgotten. NBC Nightly News Monday.
Personal treasures of the biggest stars. Celebrity auctions going once, twice, sold.
Next up, Monday at 4 on Northwest News Channel 8.
Choose your minivan, from the most luxurious Chrysler Town & Country Limited to America's lowest priced Voyager. Voyager, named a Consumer's Digest Best Buy 10 years in a row. And maybe that's why more people choose from our family of minivans than any other.
See your local Northwest Chrysler and Plymouth dealer.
News Channel 8 can also be seen on these local translators.
And we're back. Welcome all. George W. Bush. Give it a pop quiz. Let me show part of that tape and get your reaction. Here it is.
The new Pakistani general has just been elected. He's not elected. This guy took over office. He appears he's going to bring stability to the country, and I think that's good news for the subcontinent.
And you can name him.
General. I can't name the general.
And it's
General.
Finally, I asked Bush to identify the leader of India's government.
And the Prime Minister of India?
The new Prime Minister of India is, no.
Which led to this.
Can you name the Foreign Minister of Mexico?
No, sir. No, sir, but I would say to that I'm not running for president, and I don't
understand.
have a board, and I don't
I understand,
have a board policy.
but the point I say to you is that, you know, if what you're suggesting is that, what I'm suggesting to you is if you can't name the Foreign Minister of Mexico, therefore, you know, you're not capable about what you do, but the truth of the matter is you are, whether you can or not.
Bill Sapphire, fair?
That's gotcha journalism. And it's fun, but it calls more attention to the reporter than it does to the issue. I don't think we ought to dwell on these phony little tests. I think there are some pretty good, solid questions to be asked of all of these candidates. You raised one earlier, missile defense. Or instead of asking what's the name of General Musharraf or whatever his name is, I looked it up this morning. The new man running Pakistan, we should be asking George Bush and the other candidates if we agree to withdraw our sanctions that we imposed after the nuclear test, can we look to you for a restoration of democracy in Pakistan? All right, that's a question that they all have to think about. It's a toughie. And if we pose those kind of questions, we'll get an answer of what kind of president we want to have, not the quiz show.
Doris?
Well, I think most people would identify with George Bush there rather than the reporter. I still have nightmares from this mean geography teacher I had in high school that made us memorize every single stop on the Trans-Siberian Railway, and I still believe I don't know what they are. On the other hand, you want the candidate to relish learning new things. You sometimes get the feeling with George W. that he feels pretty cocky that he doesn't have to go through a process that other people do. A campaign is a great educational thing. You should be wanting to learn. You should be curious. You should be flexible. I mean, Roosevelt loved absorbing new information. John Kennedy loved it, too. You don't have to be a great student in college. In fact, John Kennedy always used to talk about his poor record in college until his mother, Rose, said, "I don't think you're setting a very good role model for children, John." So I don't think we care if he made C's at Yale, but we want to think that he is absorbing this, that he's getting new information, that he has a mental quality that loves to learn. And I'm not sure he's showing us that yet.
David?
Well, I think there were probably politicians and guests in every green room at every television station in the country this weekend wondering what pop quiz they would get. I know I would have flunked the same one that George Bush did, but he says to the public, let me be me. And that's what he is to some extent. You know, he's the governor of Texas. He has very little knowledge of foreign policy, and he spent a lot of years preferring to play a Stratomatic baseball game than really reading books.
When he says, however, that the change in government in Pakistan is bringing stability and good news, then that raises a very serious issue that should be pursued, right, Bill Sapphire?
Well, it's the old Henny Youngman line of how's your wife compared to who? Or compared to whom?
Yeah.
I think in this case, it's fun and games to test candidates with answers that you know they don't have. And it's a year before the election, so I guess we can expect some fun and games. But one of these days we're going to have to get serious. And the kind of questions that you were, slamming Podesta against the wall with a half hour ago, that's the kind of stuff we ought to be doing.
Is there a pattern here, however, that the Democrats are trying to portray George W. Bush as, quote, light? You get faxes and emails from the Democrats all the time, trying to keep, leaking his grades from college, pointing out he missed this. Al Gore saying he could have answered the questions. Is this a calculated campaign?
Oh, I think so. I mean, it makes sense for the Democrats to do that. They know they have experience, especially with Al Gore on their side, someone who would know the answers to these questions. But I think the question is, you can do it a little bit, and if he does learn on the job, if he doesn't make the same mistake twice, old Joe Kennedy used to say, you can make the same mistake. You can make a mistake once. You make the same mistake twice, then you're in trouble. I think if he shows that he's absorbed this and that he's decided that he's going to take some questions and learn some things, it'll be fine for him. I don't think the Democrats are going to get away with this for 6 months.
You can't say that the TV interviewer was part of the calculated campaign, though. I mean, he asked the same questions of Bill Bradley the next day, and Bradley declined to answer.
The reaction to this from Bill Clinton and Al Gore are quite striking. The vice president saying that, in fact, he could have answered those questions, and these are the kinds of things you have to know. The president saying, well, if you're president, you get to learn these names, and the more you become adjusted and acquainted with this kind of stuff, the better you become at it. A very subtle shiv.
It's easy for Clinton to be gracious now.
One is running, the other one isn't.
But it's also very telling because he made his point in a very political way, if you will. Another interesting issue that emerged this week in Washington, Bill Sapphire, Naomi Wolf was an advisor to Vice President Gore's campaign, a salary of $15,000 a month. Ms. Wolf was on this program about a year ago. Let me show you some of her comments about the Democratic Party back then.
I actually see it very differently than you do. I don't see it as a mommy-daddy party, but that the Democrats, certainly from '92 on, were an egalitarian family, role modeling that in their policies. And the Republicans were the old-fashioned patriarchal family that's totally alienating women. It's not a matter of women being more interested in being dependent on government policy. That suggests that women just want a handout. What it really is that the Democrats began to respect women and show that by putting women's issues, which had been marginalized, front and center.
Doris Kearns Goodwin, is this much to do about nothing, or is the fact that the vice president had an advisor secreted on a consultant's payroll out of public view, being paid $15,000 a month, significant?
Well, I think that it hits a fault line that people are worried about with all candidates today, and maybe particularly Al Gore, which is that they need advisors and experts to tell them who they are or how they should project themselves. And it's one thing to have an advisor who places ads on television, who writes speeches for you, and you should pay them for that. But to tell you how to be a man, I think, is what troubling and makes people going to laugh. I remember Lyndon Johnson used to have a similar view to Naomi. He said there were two kinds of men. There were the manly men who wore boots and hunted, and then there were these intellectual men who read poetry, and they were soft, and women liked them. And he used to get so mad because Bobby Kennedy, he thought, combined both kind of men. He ran the rapids, he climbed mountains, and yet he read poetry and Camus. So one day he said to me, I'm going to put my boots on and take you to the Pedernales, and I'll read some poetry. I could be both those men. So anyways, I think it's the problem that this is something we're going to laugh about. I don't think it's fatal, but I think it's going to be one of these fun things right now that Gore's going to take some flack for.
Yeah, but Doris, look at these two guys at the table. They're both in blue and gray outfits. This is brown, right? This is alpha male brown.
Alfa Romeo.
Right, yeah.
Earth tone sapphire. Well, all right, Mr. Earth tone, what do you think?
I come out of just the opposite. I think Naomi Wolf is an intelligent, good advisor. I think she's probably provided Gore with some solid advice about how to keep the gender gap going for the Democrats. I think she made a big mistake in agreeing to conceal her representation. It always comes out. I mean, we're always going to flush this stuff out, and then they got this great, aha, you see, there's a hidden manipulation going on. If we make a big deal out of every single advisor for every candidate, then we're just taking our eye off the ball.
Your colleague Maureen Dowd, who writes a column as well for the New York Times, had this to say. She says, of course, when a man has to pony up a fortune to a woman to teach him how to be a man, that definitely takes the edge off his top dogginess. Ms. Wolf is the moral equivalent of an Armani T-shirt because Mr. Gore has obscenely overpaid for something basic. It is advice given to all vice presidents, be your own guy. David Marinus?
Al Gore, in one sense, has been preparing to be president for most of his life, and yet I think if he becomes president, it'll be not because of any campaign, but in spite of his campaigns. The one in 1998 had similar ineptitude, and this one, most of the stories have been about his advisors. I mean, Naomi Wolf is the least of it, except for the price that they paid for her, but, you know, one a tobacco advisor, another who was left Congress in a cloud. I mean, it seems like everything is about his advisors and not Al Gore.
John McCain has a temper, Doris Kearns Goodwin.
Well, so do many other presidents have tempers. I mean, I think the question is it the kind of temper that's a sudden squall, you get over it, and you don't permanently damage relationships? I mean, Harry Truman made a virtue out of his temper when he was on that whistle-stop train in 1948, and he would say things about the do-nothing Republican Congress, and they'd yell, "Give him hell, Harry!" And he would then say, "I didn't really want to give anyone hell. It was just that I told them the truth about themselves, and they thought it was hell." But I think the question is some kinds of anger are unconcealed, and they stay suppressed forever, like Nixon's, where there's resentment that come out. I'd rather have the anger come out, get it over with. Can he recreate loyalty among his people? It seems to be his staff has been there for 15 years. That's what you look for.
Mr. Sapphire?
I think, quite frankly, I've heard for about a year now that the knock was put on McCain was that he had a temper. And some senators told me that a year ago. Watch out for McCain, he's got a temper. And now we see it's the only real thing that's being used against him. I think the accusation of you've got a temper is easy to put down. Like you say, sure, I got upset and angry at injustice or hypocrisy. That's handleable. It's when things get close in New Hampshire, and it's about, 10 or 12 points between them now, and when it gets around 2 or 3 points between them, then you might see the Bush campaign saying, well, you know, McCain was for a tobacco tax. You know, and taxes don't go well in New Hampshire. And that might get under his skin, and then we'll see if he blows, or if he blows in the right way.
Another man who had a temper, Vince Lombardi. When Pride Still Mattered, a new book by David Marinus. Quite a temper with Mr. Lombardi.
He had an explosive temper, and he went to Mass every morning and prayed about it. He knew that he
My
had
kind
it.
of guy. When Pride Still Mattered, where does that come from, David?
Well, it's actually taken from a Richard Ford novel where the character stops at the Vince Lombardi rest stop. But what it's meant to evoke is a sense that in the modern American culture, it seems not to matter whether you do something good or bad or stupid as long as you become a celebrity. And Lombardi represented something else, hard work and perseverance.
And who would he predict today is going to win the Buffalo Bills-Redskins game?
I think that he would, since he coached the Redskins, if he were coaching the Redskins, they'd win. But there are no Lombardis out there today.
This is David.
You would like Flutie.
All right, well, that's not a bad answer. This may be his last appearance on Meet the Press, David Meredith. Good luck with your book, David Meredith, Bill Sapphire, Doris Kearns Goodwin. Thank you all. Next up, 20 years ago this very week, American citizens were taken hostage in Iran. The first news of their condition was delivered right here on Meet the Press, December 9, 1979. Our Meet the Press Minute from 20 years ago is next.
Meet the Press is sponsored by GE. Visit us online at www.ge.com. GE, we bring good things to life.
If you ever have a rough ride in the Lexus RX 300, it's not our fault.
I was only kidding.
I like to live big. I like big surprises, big dreams.
Introducing the innovative new GE Spectra.
Big healthy babies.
It's so big, it holds a turkey, 2 casseroles, and 3 loaves of bread.
I like to entertain, big time.
Or 288 hors d'oeuvres, or 12 perfect pies.
I love having a whole house full of people.
GE Spectra, the biggest, most accurate oven in America. It cooks big inside and out.
Most of all, I like the big smiles that I get when I cook big.
Cook big with the incredible new GE Spectra.
Big.
My dad's had this store since I was a kid. Dad's motto was, the customer is always right. Never say no, if you can help it. The problem was... Pack smokes? Kids would try to buy cigarettes. You got an ID for those smokes?
Oh, come on.
It's illegal for me to sell them to anyone under 18. I have heard the lamest excuses.
Her dog ate my ID. You did?
We need them for school science project.
They're not for us. They're for my mom outside. Mom, I look young for my age.
But that all changed a few years ago when this We Card program started. Now there's no argument. I just point to the sign.
We're committed to keeping cigarettes out of kids' hands. That's why Philip Morris is a major sponsor of the We Card program. It has educated hundreds of thousands of retailers on how to recognize fake IDs and uphold the law. And it lets kids know exactly where we and retailers across the country stand.
I'm not alone when I say no, and that's a big help.
Working to make a difference. The people of Philip Morris.
The U.S. Postal Service, with new automated systems from Lockheed Martin, is speeding the delivery of billions of pieces of mail. And the occasional birthday present from Uncle Will. Interestingly, Lockheed Martin is also building America's next generation of fighter planes, which means we not only help deliver the present, but the future.
We're back. 20 years ago this week, followers of Iran's Ayatollah Khomeini stormed the American embassy in Tehran and seized American citizens. For weeks, there was no news what was happening to the hostages. On December 9, 1979, Iran's foreign minister and a close associate of Khomeini's, Zadeh Ghotzadeh, appeared on Meet the Press and gave the first word of their condition.
There have been conflicting statements in the last day or so about whether Americans will be released or whether they will be put on trial. Can you tell us what the latest is on that? Will some be released? Will some or all be put on trial?
Those who are not guilty of the spying, they cannot be held forever. So the question of the release of those hostages who are not participating in the espionage system is coming. The date I cannot fix, but the question is, that will be done. But the rest will depend on when the Shah will be returned to Iran.
Why is it necessary to keep the hostages bound? Why would not Iran improve its position before world public opinion if the hostages were untied and they were permitted to be seen by neutral observers?
Well, I've already said it before, and I repeat it again. Believe me, Mr. Monroe, they are fine, and they are in good health, and they are comfortable, and we will have the international independent observers to see them, and at that time you will realize that all these propagandas against us were false, and we really didn't do that much of the things that you probably have heard in the United States that we are doing to the hostages.
13 months after that interview, after 444 days in captivity, the 52 American hostages were released. As for the foreign minister, on September 15, 1982, he was executed by a firing squad after his conviction on charges of plotting to assassinate the Ayatollah Khomeini and overthrow Iran's Islamic regime. He was 46 years old. And we'll be right back.
The best things in life just come naturally. Like natural vitamin E from ADM. Made from the healthy goodness of soybeans, you'll find it in many leading brands of dietary supplements. Studies have shown that natural vitamin E is significantly more effective than synthetic brands, helping you stay healthy in your golden years by maintaining your body's own disease-fighting abilities, while helping you maintain mental sharpness. After all, you're only as old as you feel. And think, it's your health. It's your life. Do what's right for you. Natural vitamin E from ADM. Do what comes naturally.
We want to live in our home, not a nursing home.
We want our children to care about us.
Not for us.
I want to grow old gracefully.
With dignity.
All good intentions, but help make them a reality with long-term care insurance from GE. GE gives you options like care in your own home to help preserve your independence and life savings.
I want my grandchildren to inherit more.
More than just memories. For long-term care insurance, think of GE.
I've had Parkinson's for about 3.5 years. Imagine that you can't walk because your legs won't do what you tell them to do. I fell 3 different times. I couldn't stop shaking. At my pharmaceutical company, we've developed a medicine that helps the other medicines be more effective. The new medicine has helped these people gain control again. I hope within my lifetime we'll find a cure for Parkinson's disease.
Coming up in Dateline tonight.
Thanks, Tim. You've heard the controversy over Swiss banks and the assets of Holocaust survivors. Tonight, the debate reaches American shores and 2 of the biggest and best-known American banks. That story tonight on Dateline at 7, 6 Central. Tim?
Thank you, Stone. Start your day tomorrow on Today with Katie and Matt, then the NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw. Today is the 52nd anniversary of Meet the Press, longest-running television show on the air, 52 years going strong. See you next week.
The countdown to 2000 in Pioneer Courthouse Square has begun.
At MotherNature.com, we're constantly checking out products like ginkgo biloba, a natural herb from China used to enhance memory.
What exactly did you have for dinner last night?
Chicken?
He had the Chang Chang noodles and half a spring roll, followed by Mushu pork. The bill was $24.32.
Ginkgo biloba is just one of thousands of quality herbs, vitamins, and natural products we offer. We even have organic coffee. Over here, they're checking out maca, a Peruvian herb that's said to enhance male virility.
Morning, Mother Nature.
Very nice. Is it working?
Yeah, I think so.
I can't make any guarantees, but have you noticed how happy Peruvian music is? We also have a virtual library of information you can check out anytime. Log on now. Your first purchase is free, up to $20.
You have 10 seconds to tell me why guns are good.
Northwest News Channel 8 presents Your Northwest Home with Elaine Busby.